Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. We have an absolute exclusive interview here tonight with the former Leicester City manager, the former Aston Villa manager, Glasgow Celtic manager, Sunderland manager, Republic of Ireland manager, Nottingham Forest European Cup winner, and a player that has appeared at the highest level throughout the game, whether it's the players and manager. We're delighted and honoured this evening to be joined by our special guest, Martin O'Neill, to talk about his special autobiography coming out on days like this, which you can buy in every bookstore across Ireland at the moment. I've actually had a privilege to have a read of it myself, a fantastic read. Martin, first of all, thanks for joining us this evening and sharing your thoughts on what is a real significant moment for you at the present.
Oh, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for having me. I must admit, I've been talking about the book. Basically, decided to write it by longhand to begin with. You know, I didn't use a ghostwriter. I just thought I would try and pen something together myself, and it took a few months, I must admit, but really did enjoy it. And I think it was as much to do with the fact that having had 50 years in football, straddling a long time, seeing the changes from when I first joined Nottingham Forest as a 19-year-old player to seeing the changes that have taken place into the game as it is today currently.
And Martin, I was looking there, and I suppose there's so many aspects I want to get into. There's such a short time, but I'm going to try and get into as many of them as I can. You grew up in Derry, and obviously you came from a rich GA background. Your father was one of the founding members of the local GA club. Your brother Leo played for Derry in an All-Ireland final. But the first dream of a young Martin O'Neill growing up was actually to play for Derry and to win an All-Ireland title yourself in terms of that. Were you a passionate GA person? Were you a passionate? I know you were the part of Ireland that you come from, and was that the sort of goal for you in terms of the youngster? Were you big a GA sort of household? Was it GA first in Martin O'Neill's household?
I absolutely a very, very strong influence in GAA, really big. You've just mentioned the things. I'm not going into detail. My father, one of the founder members of the local Gaelic club. My older brother, Leo, who was only 18, 19 at the time, played and came on as a sub in the All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin in 1958. My mother took me to the game on a bus, and my father went with some of his own friends differently. And so that was a phenomenal experience, to see Croke Park. I mean, it has changed since 1958, but I have to say, it was very difficult not to think about anything else other than GAA. Every single Sunday, my two brothers, Leo and Jerry, would either be playing, hopefully for the county team, but when they weren't playing, then it was club level. I'm going to all these games as a young fellow, watching Kilrea having a brilliant seven-a-side team when they played in carnival football. So those evenings watching my brothers play for Kilrea, winning some big trophies with carnivals, with the local teams. It was exactly that. It was neon signs just about everywhere at the time. So and then when I go to college, Gaelic soccer has not been played at all. We don't have any soccer leagues or anything that gets here. It's Gaelic, so it's college football, and I loved that as well too. And even when I moved from one college into Belfast College, St Malachy's, playing in the Hogan Cup final was just another. It was like Gaelic all the way up until a stage where obviously I had a keen interest in soccer at the same time. I loved playing both, but eventually I thought that trying to make the grade as a professional player was an ambition of mine.
And Michael, Martin, in terms of your own growing up, one of your childhood heroes was the great Michael O'Hare, the commentator. And what's poignant for me and poignant for us doing this interview is that where I come from, Michael O'Hare is born in my village in Ballycally, County Derry. Only 100 yards up the road is his household. Actually, the GA fields that are across the road is actually named after him in there. So it's poignant to see that he was one of your heroes, and you grew up with his commentary on the radio, I do believe. You were fascinated by him.
Absolutely. I mean, he had the voice to die for. It was we had it every particular Sunday, on Sundays again. Even when Derry weren't involved, you would be getting a game between, let's say, Kerry and Galway. People like Sean Purcell. You're talking about players that you just other players that came to mind were Frank Stockwell, Frank Ivers, Paddy Sheehy, obviously, in those days. So I used to race up to the, I hate to say this now, up to the loo, and I would pretend that you would be Michael O'Hare, and like Paddy Sheehy's got the ball, he's dummy to the right, dummy to the left, and then he shoots in the side. And then of course I have to try and make the same noise as like maybe 60,000 people at Croke Park. So it's a big long whoosh at the end of it, and he scores. And particularly if a goal is scored, it's just the noise. So I try to make the noise as well as the commentary. So honestly, I think for any 6, 7, 8-year-old, I think people on the outside of the toilet must have thought I was off my rocker.
Martin, I'll turn now to soccer, and you left Ireland at a young age, only 19, to join Nottingham Forest in the height of the troubles where you were based in Derry. How difficult was that a decision? Was it to try and get away from that sort of area, that sort of time, a new sort of release in life? Was it difficult times being a teenager at 18 or 19 with everything going around? And did some of your friends obviously get involved in the wrong sort of things, or did you hear about misfortunes happening to people in your neighbourhood? Was it a new adventure heading to England, heading to soccer to get away from everything that was happening outside your doorstep practically?
No, that getting away from things became like a part of it wasn't so much why you left, but it just became as a consequence. No, my ambition was really to become a professional footballer in England. That's what I wanted to do. And I was studying law at Queen's University, just started out in the course, and the opportunity came because I was playing amateur football for a team called Distillery, who were a Irish League team, with the same, I would say, the same pedigree as the League of Ireland teams. And so I was playing as an amateur then, scored a couple of goals in the cup final against Derry City, and then scored a goal against Barcelona, which gained some traction, I must admit, in the English media. As a consequence, the manager of Nottingham Forest came over to watch me play in a game where I got 20 minutes in an international match, and the following week I was at Nottingham Forest. So getting away from Belfast only became as a consequence of leaving, but that was not it. It was my ambition, as I said to you, was to become a professional footballer if I could do that.
And becoming a professional footballer, one object you took upon yourself at a very young age was to keep a diary as a player. To monument your highs and your lows and to track your progress as a player. Was that something that was advised to you when you arrived in Nottingham Forest in terms of that, or was that something you took on a personal sort of mission to just plot your rise?
Just myself, Jim. Absolutely. I think that my mother probably had bought me a diary for about 4 or 5 years beforehand. And I would have got to about January the 4th before packing it in. So I don't know, it's the same, all the great resolutions that you have on January the 1st, and by the 4th of January, they've disappeared. But this particular year, which happened to be my first year as a professional player, I came to Nottingham in late 1971, October 71. So I started the diary in January 72. But honestly, if I was to show you some of the excerpts from it, I think you would laugh. I think you might have thought that a child of about 4.5 years of age was writing it. It's so puerile, I must admit. But little things like manager doesn't like me, usual thing. Probably blaming everyone for my own state of woe, rather than having a good look at myself. But no, there were other days when I said, yes, must do much better, must train harder, must get into this team, must do all of these things. So it was one of those, but it was interspersed with who was at number 1 or number 3 in the charts. the pop charts, on top of the pops and things like this here. So it was a kind of a mixture of a music, certainly was a musical interlude anyway to the scribblings.
And Martin, obviously you've managed players in your own club career that are on roughly 60, 70,000 a year, basically. Well, 60, 70,000 for some cases. In some cases for players, monthly is weekly is now what we're talking about. But in your time in Nottingham Forest, you were on a basic €50 a week in terms of the wages, in terms of that. And was that a substantial figure at that time? Could you live a sort of healthy lifestyle and enjoy everything that came with being a footballer over in England on €50 a week?
Well, that's a good point, Jim. It would be interesting to know what the national wage was at the time. And remember, sorry, you're too young to remember, but way back then, we are talking about very high income tax rates as well, too. So even the money that seemed, well, when I went over, first of all, I was on £45 a week, £45 a week. That was sterling at the time. But I remember, and this seemed phenomenal because I might have been getting a couple of quid pocket money at distillery just for being an amateur and just for expenses. And so this looked at a real sizable amount. But in those days, the tax was pretty ferocious as well too. So the type of money that you're getting wasn't. It seemed as if it was well above the national average, but it wouldn't have been that great. And there wouldn't have been too many players in my time that would have earned enough money in the game to sustain them for the rest of their lives. Now I know for a pretty bang average let's say midfield player playing in the Premier League for a couple of seasons, I don't think you'll have too much to worry about when he retired. So those are the changes. But you know what? Honestly, I really don't think that mattered. The money aspect, but it never wildly bothered me. I think it actually should do, but I always felt, well, the next year is going to be better, and you're fighting every single year to be better. But it wasn't that. I wanted to try and obviously do as well as you possibly can, but to win medals. That was the nature of the game, and to play in the first division for a start, which is now the Premier League, was obviously a big massive incentive, and it's what you wanted to do, and to play regularly in that, and then to win medals at the end of that was. And if you ask a lot of professional players of my vintage, of my time, they would have said exactly the same thing. To hold the European Cup aloft was just like a dream come true. And I actually think that we might have gone into the first European Cup final having no idea whether we had a bonus or not at the end. But I must admit, I do listen now. I saw a part of a documentary about Geoff Hurst, the England player who scored a hat-trick in the 1966 World Cup final. And they were given £1,000 each for winning the World Cup. So, and it wasn't immediate. It was almost like an afterthought that was given to them. So, but you're asking Geoff Hurst, would that have mattered at that particular time? No. Would he feel a bit envious of what players are earning now? Yes, absolutely. Would he feel envious about players who weren't as good as him? Absolutely. But sure, isn't that life?
Martin, before I bring you on to the managerial career, I just want to touch on two things with Northern Ireland. And there's a great thing where you said that your first time at Northern Ireland being mesmerised by the great Georgie Best, and actually watching his pre-match routine, and obviously being blown away that he was actually polishing his own boots before he went out to play against Spain, in terms of that he was so meticulous that no one could actually touch his boots. Georgie had to put the shine on the boots himself before he went out to Spain. Were you sort of blown away by that larger than life sort of character when you arrived at Northern Ireland? Obviously you had great successes getting to 82 and all that, but were you sort of taken back in awe of Georgie's character? Did he lead a room when he walked into where people just jaws dropped? Absolutely.
You've got it in one, Jim. Absolutely. This was it. He was my first meeting with him was in that game you're talking about. Northern Ireland could not play their home games at Windsor Park because of the troubles. So we were kind of a wandering team playing all over England, international matches. This one happened to be at Hull against Spain in the afternoon. And this was my first couple of days with George Best beforehand. And the fact is that, after his match on the Saturday, he must have been whisked away or whisked himself away to maybe some nightclub in Manchester that Saturday night, but he hadn't even had a chance to clean his match boots. So eventually, when he's opening up his match boots just an hour before kickoff, he sees some bits of mud or dried mud still sticking to it, and then he hits them against the floor just to clear the mud off, like a player who was playing in the 4th division. And it was, but he was the most. He was certainly at that stage, I would say, probably the most talked about player in European football at the time. This is 1972, and he looked fantastic. Everybody, you talked about walking into a room, George Best had it. He didn't have to say a word. He was so magnetic.
Obviously, Martin, Brian Clough had a big influence in terms of your playing career, and obviously there's probably aspects of his personality and his traits as a manager that probably you brought across to your own career. But I just remember that famous passage. I was reading through it, and I was sort of blown away by it, that when you won the European Cup final for the first time and you were a sub, that he refused to give out the medals to the subs, the 5 subs that didn't play, and he wouldn't even let you have the medals in terms of your family and sort of stuff like that. I imagine you must be filled at that moment absolute sheer rage. You're just after winning a European Cup final, the highlight of your career. Obviously, you want to go out and celebrate and have the euphoric sort of moments, and then here's this piece that has belonged to you, and he's saying no, that you can't have it because you didn't play a part in the actual final itself. Did it take you a while to get over that? And at that time, do you think, listen, if he doesn't respect me, I want out of here?
No. Just to put it in context, myself and Archie Gemmell had played in the semi-finals of the competition, and but Trevor Francis became eligible for the final. Trevor Francis was a great player, really, really great, first £1 million player ever in world football. And but what had happened with Archie and I were injured, and obviously when you're injured and you don't play, and we became subs in the game and don't get on, Jim, you don't feel part of it at all. You ask Roy Keane, he didn't feel part of playing in the 1999 European Cup final because he didn't play in it, despite the fact he was a driving force to get them there. So that didn't happen. So, but it wasn't really that there. It was the fact is that Brian Clough was not given a medal at that particular time. Only players got medals. Nowadays, managers get them, coaches get them, people get the medals, and there's more cut. And so there was only a certain number of medals. And so he asked the substitutes to give up their medals because he wanted a few cut for himself and Peter Taylor and the coach and things like this here. And that was fine, that was okay. But what I'd done, I just asked could I bring the medal out just for 10 or 15 minutes to show my family outside, because this was the medal. And when he refused, that's when I threw it across the table. And then there was a bit of silence then. But I did pick the medal up and just signed the little box that it was in, and said to Jimmy Gordon, who was the first team coach, Jimmy, when these medals come back in a month or so, that's the medal I want. And that's the medal I got back.
Martin, I'm going to bring you on now to the managerial career, and obviously great heights with Wickham, but I just want to start with Leicester City. And I remember looking through and reading through the novel, and there was a part for Leicester City at the start where things weren't really going to plan, and obviously you were there, dare I say, you were fearing for your job at certain times at the beginning. And I remember reading a passage where you said you were 400 yards from the stadium, and all you would see was the banners coming in saying O'Neill out, and pack it in, O'Neill, and chance go back to Forest was coming from the shouts above you in terms of the stance and sorts of stuff like that. Was it a real rocky time? Was there any point where it was really do or die? Obviously, you had 5 wins on the bounce and everything started to turn from there. But was there a time at Leicester City at those early stages when the sack could have been very much inevitable? Was it in terms of the fans were against you at that time? Obviously, some of the chairman, there was added pressure. It was almost like a do or die situation every sort of game until you got in that run. And What was that early period like at Leicester City? Was it really rough for you and your family?
No, you mentioned it being rocky, and that's exactly what it was. I'd come in and unable to win a game early on in proceedings. I know there was a couple of cup games attached to that there where we played Manchester City, and Manchester City were a league above us. They were in the big league and they were far, far stronger than us. But in terms of league games for us, it was really tough. And the crowd, maybe because I had played for Nottingham Forest, was just up the road from Leicester. I don't think that the fans might have been enamored with that. Another change of manager. Mark McGee had left to go to Wolves. I've come in. So, and then you need to get up and running immediately, and that didn't happen. And therefore, there was a great deal of rockiness attached to that. But I know I take some pride in the fact is that somewhere along the way, I found a way to win the football games, the games that mattered. And eventually we got promotion through the playoffs. And of course, we won the League Cup the following season. And for the next 4 years, up until Leicester City won the league there back in 2016, my team was probably the most successful side that Leicester had ever had. But I eventually had a great rapport with the crowd. So, and when there was an opportunity to go to Leeds United, the fans have banners up, almost the same banners that were saying O'Neill out, were saying, please Martin stay. So that was nice. And I loved my time at Leicester. And if I had to do over again, I would put up with a rocky period to begin with. And in actual fact, in many aspects, that if you can survive and prosper from that, actually that rocky period probably helps you. But I'm not advocating it to any up and coming manager. You know, if it's going to be rocky, you might not get the opportunity to survive and prosper.
And you mentioned that obviously scoring the playoff winner against Crystal Palace was Steve Claridge, got you promoted to the Premier League. And within a year then, obviously, you're winning the Coca-Cola Cup, you're beating a Borough team with Ravanelli, Emerson, Janino, and all of a sudden you're playing in Europe for Leicester City, the likes of Robbie Savage, as Kevin Giangi from Crewe, Neil Lennon's there, Emil Heskey's establishing himself as now Premier League sort of striker. In terms of that, did you feel maybe at the time everything was sort of rosy in terms of you, but was always piping for a new challenge, or were you very satisfied?
No, I was absolutely. I was very satisfied there. We had qualified for Europe by the year 2000. We had won our second League Cup. We'd been in the final the previous year, so three finals in 4 years. Top 10 finishes all 4 times. Absolutely, I was really settled, and even though Emil Heskey had gone to Liverpool, the chairman at the time was saying that we can use most of this money to try and strengthen the side, and as a consequence, very happy. And then out of the blue in the summertime came a call to have would I have been interested in going to manage Celtic, and that absolutely, and this is what I wanted to do.
And Martin, obviously that affiliation with Glasgow Celtic, obviously here in Ireland, it's a major thing. But you're just come in the door of Glasgow Celtic, and within the first month, you're hearing Mark Verdugo wants to go. He wants to leave. A well-established sort of striker. Obviously, your intentions obviously was starting him with Heinrich Larsson, and all of a sudden, Mark Verdugo wants out of Glasgow Celtic. Was that a big bombshell even to begin with before you've even entered the doors of Parkhead?
It probably was. It probably really was, Jim. Yes, in that sense that you'd be hoping that Mark Verdugo would want to stay at the football club. That I must admit that was what I wanted to do. Excuse me. Sorry, 1 second. And can you see me? Okay. Sorry,
yeah,
Jim.
Perfect, Martin.
Yeah. Apologize for that.
No problem in the world.
Going back into my spot again. And so Mark was a very, very fine footballer, as he proved. And I would like him to have stayed, but he didn't want to stay. That's fine. Leeds United paid £6 million for him. And I turned the money over. We signed Chris Sutton, and Sutton was a game changer for us, Jim, a real game changer, a landscape changer, as I've actually mentioned, because his relationship, both on and off the field with Henrik Larsson, was absolutely crucial to our start in the season. And if Chris Sutton had not come to the football club at the time he did, let's say there had been a period of maybe 3 or 4 weeks before he decided to come, we might not have had the start that we got. We might not have beaten Rangers 6-2 in my first ever Old Firm game. And life might have been different. And Rangers might have, because they were so strong the previous year, they might have got the bit between their teeth early. Instead, Chris Sutton arrived at the football club, did brilliantly for us, and was a master player for us. So Verdugo leaving, Chris Sutton coming, was actually probably for the football club, and maybe even for Henrik Larsson, probably really good news. Not for 1 minute, I'm not saying that Mark Verdugo was not, he was a terrific footballer, as he proved, but if he didn't want to stay at the football club, there was no point in trying to persuade him otherwise.
And obviously, Martin, we know the difficulties for professional managers to attract players to Scotland, even now for the big clubs to attract the real top drawer players. But you're after losing a quality player like Mark Verdugo. You mentioned Chris Sutton. But did you have to use the lure of the big teams like Barcelona, Juventus, these Champions League nights to get these players in the door to come for Celtic? And was that only the reason that they would come and join you, was for those big nights once a year? Because obviously they came with an expectation, obviously, to that a mere expectation. If you come to Scotland, you might pick up a Premiership medal for yourself. But what they probably came was probably test themselves in those European nights against the Juventus, Barcelonas, which you had in abundance at your time in Celtic. Was that the lure? Was that the trap for you in terms of enticing these players to come to Celtic?
Yeah, well, first of all, there are a couple of points to your question, which, and initially I totally agree with you. Absolutely. But remember, these people, these particular players that you're talking about, particularly English players, maybe like Chris Sutton, maybe like Alan Thompson, and maybe some, accepted the fact that Celtic was a big club, but didn't really realize how big it was until they arrived there. So that was something. So the lure, you're right, of perhaps playing maybe Champions League football, and Celtic had not done that for quite some considerable time. But the lure of that there was certainly initially a selling point. But once they got there, once they got to the football club, to realize the size of it, to see those things, you know, then these boys fell in love with the football club. Really did. You only have to ask Chris Sutton and Alan Thompson, Neil Lennon, people like us here who come, and they didn't stay for a month or two, you know, looking to go elsewhere. These boys stayed for the length of period that I stayed, and longer. In some cases. So absolutely. So your point is valid in the sense of luring them there. Once they got there, the realization of just how big Celtic was initially something of a surprise to them. In fact, it not a surprise, it was probably a shock to them.
And I suppose, Martin, at that time in Celtic as well, you would have the big European nights, say, against the likes of an AC Milan, a star-studded team like that, your Maldinis, your Nestas, players, Costa Cortas, your Bobans, all these players are real top drawer qualities that I might have ventured towards Celtic at that time. Maybe the Saturday before that Wednesday night, you're playing St Mirren in the league. Did the preparation for the AC Milans, the Juventus, did that in essence begin a week and a half beforehand? And did you almost treat the St Mirren game as a game to get out of the way of, in terms of looking towards AC Milan? Well, right, we're going to use players who are just going to get us the points against St Mirren, and maybe hold back what we need to have a real tackle at it, the likes of an AC Milan.
No, I treated St Mirren exactly the same manner as I would treat AC Milan, and you cannot do that. Seriously, you've got to put heart and soul. You have got to put your mindset right to these games, because if you take your if you take your mind off it, and then half an hour later in a game, you find yourself maybe 1-0 trailing somewhere, and it's hard to fight that back. No, absolutely not. I'd never played what I would call a weakened team, so that I would be able to concentrate on a match coming up against, let's say, AC Milan or Bayern Munich, as the case may be. No, absolutely not. No, treated it, once that game hopefully was played and won, then you concentrate then. Now, I take your other point. Absolutely. Is it difficult? Is it difficult You know, you would know that maybe that, let's say Bayern Munich would have played maybe Dortmund the previous week in a big game, and we might have played maybe supposedly lesser opposition here to get players into a mindset now European football. But the enjoyment was playing these games, and I think that the players rose to the occasion so many times that that Celtic Park became the old fortress, as they talk about. And we were very, very hard to beat in many aspects. And we had some really good players. Henrik Larsson being an outstanding talent. And but we had backup players, and I signed some players who gave Henrik Larsson the service that he was crying out for. So no wonder in one particular season he scored 50 goals. But the great news, Jim, about Henrik was that he went on to prove himself anyway at Barcelona later in his career. And he would also went to Manchester United when I think he was maybe about 34 years of age, scoring goals in the Premier League. So this idea that Henrik Larsson could only have played in the Scottish League is just absolute nonsense.
Martin, obviously one of the low points, and obviously you had so many high points, but that Porto UEFA Cup final, as it was called back then, losing it to Porto in Sevilla at that time. Was that really, really hard for you? Did it take you 2 months, 3 months? Did you ever really get over it? Does it still probably give you nightmares even to this day in terms of that sort of game? Can you park that? Obviously, it was probably one of the biggest moments of Celtic's football in the last 20 years. Obviously, you did great to get there, but everything just didn't seem to go right for you on the night.
Well, we Henrik Larsson had a fantastic game. We went 2-2. We were 2-2 in the game. We went into extra time, boiling hot conditions. Then Bobo Baldi gets sent off in the game, and they scored the winning goal. Now you have to remember that Porto side went on to win the Champions League the following year, virtually the same team again. So that's how close we were to it. We should have won. We should have won on the day. I think the antics of the Porto side that day, and they didn't need to, you know, the sort of play acting, things like this here reached a new level, I felt, but they didn't have to do it because they were super players. It was and they were run by Mourinho, who's, you know, excellent coach, one of the best, and it was at the start of his run, I think, of great success. But overall, can you forget about it? No, it's very difficult to, because it would have been lovely. We had 75,000 people, 75,000 Celtic fans descend upon Seville. And for them still to this day say it was one of the best days ever, the whole trip to Seville, the journey there, the beating of Blackburn Rovers, England versus Scotland, the beating of Liverpool in the quarter-final, when we went to Anfield and beat them. Those, I think, when the fans talk about it, I think they mean the route to that and the whole journey, and including the trip to Seville as well too. So yeah, but for me, the disappointment still haunts you because we've lost the game. Had we won, had Bobo Baldi not been sent off, had it gone into penalties, and maybe we had won the penalty shootout, you know, life might have been different. But for us, for Celtic maybe to have won the first major trophy again since 1967 in European football, that would have been lovely.
Martin, obviously I remember very well, I was around 15 or 16. I remember the Aston Villa years. And of all the club teams that you managed, I think basically your best squad of players was with Aston Villa. You just look, if I just list some of the names: Ashley Young, Stuart Downing, Gareth Barry, Gabriel Agbonlahor, James Milner, Stilian Petrov, Johan Carew, Nigel Reo-Coker, Zach Knight, Richard Dunn. I mean, and I've left out a good few names there as well, like Martin Larsson and a few others. But that was, if you look at that on paper, that's a Champions League sort of squad that would be in the running for a Champions League sort of places at that sort of the time. Were you sort of, when you look back at how things came in at Aston Villa with the James Milner transfer, are you sort of disappointed that things finished that way? Did you feel that there was more potential looking at that Aston Villa team? I've certainly felt that there was more potential, that if you stayed on for another year or two and you reinvested after Milner, that you could have pushed them even further.
I totally agree with you, Jim. Absolutely agree with you. If yes, you know, if I regret the circumstances of leaving Aston Villa at the time, and you're absolutely right about the talent. It was just coming to. It was really coming to the fore. It was very strong. We should have won the League Cup the previous year. against Manchester United at Wembley. And Manchester United, we scored a penalty in the first minute, but Vidic should have been sent off the field. And just to have won that trophy would have been terrific. But had the team the potential to be in the Champions League? We fell short in the last few games of 2 of the seasons. Absolutely, yes, definitely. And if another season like that there, I wouldn't have expected when I left Aston Villa to struggle so much as they did do even that particular season. I mean, they had a better end to it and pushed themselves up the positions, but it was a struggle. And a lot of Villa fans obviously blame me for leaving the football club at the time. But you're getting back to your point. I absolutely agree with you. We had the potential to be a Champions League side, and that was my aim. That's what I wanted to do.
And I know, obviously, the relationship between a manager and chairman is so vital in terms of this. But obviously, you come in the door, first off, your relationship with Doug Ellis. He tells you, don't be bringing on Martin Lawson for the final 10 minutes because we have to pay him 3,000 of an appearance fee every time he comes on. You come in then for Randy Lerner. He tells you straight away, we're going to replace James Milner with sort of Scott Parker. Was it mainly the broken promises?
He didn't. Sorry, Jim. He didn't say that immediately. No, absolutely. My relationship with Randy Lerner was very strong up until probably the last year. And ironically, our last year was by far our best year. Most points that we had. I know we finished 6th again, but we were in the final of the League Cup against Manchester United. And we were in the semi-final of the League Cup against Chelsea. And we were getting stronger. Just the point that you made in your previous question, we were getting stronger and stronger. So, to be fair to Mr. Lerner, no, we had a really good relationship. It was only in the latter stages when James Milner wanted to leave the football club that it became, more tetchy than for want of a better word. But really, no, in early days, Mr. Lerner put money into to try and improve the football club. He tried to improve the services. Where an Aston Villa fan could have a good time at a football game and enjoy himself. So he tried to improve a lot of those things. So in fairness to him, and he definitely improved the training ground as well too. So there are lots of things that Mr. Lerner did exceptionally well.
Martin, just briefly on Sunderland before I finally bring you to Republic of Ireland. Obviously, you took on the Sunderland job. It was obviously a home sort of feeling, closer to home to you. But were you sort of maybe bit disappointed when you came in to Sunderland, when you looked at the depth of the quality of the squad previously, what you had to Aston Villa? Did you realise straight away, now I'm coming into a club that is mid-table, hovering on relegation? If I could get them to 13 or 14 here on the table, I'll have exceeded my expectations. And that was it just maybe a lack of depth outside the front 11 that you didn't have those concerns with the Villa that you probably had in Sunderland? Missed 1 or 2 players at Sunderland, backs up against it straight away.
Well, I came in December, and the day that I took over the football club, or my first game in charge, which was a Sunday afternoon, and on that particular day, with the results over the weekend, Sunderland had dropped into the bottom 3. So it was a genuine struggle then at the time. The emergence then of James McLean was terrific.
But you give him his debut. Yeah,
absolutely, and he did wonderfully well. But what I'm saying is, yes, and then we got results quite early on, which kind of covered over the cracks, as it were. The team was never strong enough, as it was proved, even with the new manager after I left, Di Canio coming in and adding 15 players in that particular summertime to his squad. The squad was never strong enough. So yes, there was a marked difference between the strength that we had at Aston Villa and the caliber of player at Sunderland at that time. Hence it being a struggle. And yes, but I would love.
Was there a vast difference in budgets as well, Martin?
A vast difference in budgets. Yeah, you would have to say in terms of the players that we had at Aston Villa. Now, for instance, you talk about James Milner. James Milner felt, I love James Milner. I signed him, and we doubled our money when he left the football club. But doubling the money didn't matter to me. James Milner was going to earn more money by a long chalk at Manchester City, And in fairness, with Manchester City on the rise at that time, the chances are that he was going to win. He was going to win more medals. As it turns out, he did do. So, but of caliber of player, yeah, we did not have the same caliber of player as we at Sunderland that I had at Aston Villa. Simple as that.
Martin, I'm going to lastly bring you on to Republic of Ireland, and roughly in terms of coming on Ireland, I know you're a bit hesitant, you said, first of all, in taking the job, coming from club management, stepping into international management as well. And you met John Delaney, first of all, and he's probably the only guarantees he gave you in terms of renewing your contract was if you qualify for Euro 2016. But in terms of that decision early on, bringing Roy in, obviously you were probably aware of the background of what happened in Korea and Japan in 2002 and everything with Roy and Mick and obviously John Delaney. Was that a hard sort of discussion to even approach that with John Delaney, or do you were firmly mindset that you were coming in as a duo and tandem and this was part of the deal straight from the off?
Okay, 3 points. Number one, let me reiterate, it was a privilege to manage the Republic of Ireland. My concern was not managing the Republic of Ireland, but it was going from being a club manager to being an international manager. And that's the very obvious difference, which you can glean, is actually the length of time you have with a player. This is not club football. You don't have a transfer kitty. You don't have any of these particular things. You know this anyway. And you know that the handicaps of international football are, and you know the caliber of player that chances are that you will be dealing with. None of those things, in terms of the players I had at the Republic of Ireland, almost to a man wanted to play for the green shirt, which was unbelievably encouraging, and that was great. And that hopefully that will never change. So it's not as if to say that you had to encourage players to do that. And particularly the players who were born in Ireland itself. However, getting back to your second one, so I just wanted to emphasize that it was a genuine privilege to manage the Republic of Ireland. But the difference was, and my concern of getting my head around managing a team at club level, which I'd done all my life, and managing internationally, where you would only have the players for a very, very short period of time. When I asked John Delaney about bringing on Roy on board, I jokingly say I had to pick him up from. I almost fainted, but that's it's a joke really. John had no problem whatsoever, none at all, and taking Roy on. Now I know that there was things in the past that had happened, but absolutely not. It was my choice to do this here. I didn't. Roy and I had done some punditry work together in some Champions League games, and we talked about international football. And so when the opportunity came up, I said to him, "Would you fancy doing it?" Of course, absolutely, because it was Ireland as well too. He didn't hesitate, but John Delaney had no problem whatsoever. So this, so there's really no story there. John was said, "Yeah, absolutely." I think he did jokingly say, "We'll have to batten down the hatches," or something like that there, but but taking Roy on, and Roy was absolutely terrific, really terrific. Now he's a manager himself. He's been a manager and used to making all decisions. So that would be difficult for any assistant manager who's been a manager. But Roy would have a say in proceedings. But if eventually the final decision be up to me in terms of picking and doing certain things. And and Roy would say, "Well, okay, you know my word, but this is where we go," and he would be backing you absolutely to the full. So not at all was he obviously revered by the players as well too. I know in the sense that what a player he was himself. So, and he's a generation removed from myself. So I always had that sort of seniority in that sense. But no, absolutely, and even to this day. We took the qualification for the Euros that night. I know we beat Germany in a night, but to me, that was superseded by our night in Bosnia because there was a finality attached to it. We had finally qualified for France, and our games in France were terrific. And who could? Two things that stand out to me. One, I wanted to try and recreate, if there's such a thing as recreating something that's already happened years ago, but to recreate Jack Charlton's famous, the strength of that team that Jack Charlton had was, you know, obviously superior to us. However, it was the scenes when they come back to Dublin again, you know, the scenes at the airport, scenes in the city. And so I must admit, and I do say this, when we had 25,000 fans in our first game against Sweden in that in the stadium in Paris, that, and hear them singing at the top of their voices, just, you know, was just fantastic. And obviously, Robbie Brady's goal against Italy, just, you know, is up there with any big moments that I've had.
And Martin, obviously you're not going to critique players, and we're not going to ask you about players, but obviously when you came into the Ireland job, you looked around the squad, you saw you had Seamus Coleman, a Premier League player, you saw you had John O'Shea, a Premier League player, and you probably saw you had Robbie Keane as well, and probably McGeady and McLean, you obviously knew about those abilities. But I suppose what was lacking from Ireland in terms of trying to change the style from Trapattoni was that we probably didn't have dare I say, half a player, but even the half a quality of Luka Modric in the midfield in terms of who could get on the ball, dictate play, move the sort of tempo, and maybe around that central midfield. But do you feel that was Ireland really were sort of lacking in terms of implementing that? While you're quality defenders and you're probably a striker like Robbie who could poach a goal, but in terms of that, being able to dictate tempo, dictate around the midfield, was that really you're lacking that Premier League quality there?
We needed Robbie Keane. Obviously was a terrific goal scorer, but Robbie was getting on. He was really getting on in age, and so and it would have been difficult for Robbie to have lasted out the games. He started in some matches for us. I think he even started in Georgia as well in the games. But you knew that there would be a period where Robbie just couldn't last. But he would have been the most natural goal scorer that we would have had. We didn't have that. If I said to you in that run to the Euros that John Walters, who was he's playing for us sometimes as a striker, sometimes wide in the right hand side, and did both jobs admirably. But you wouldn't say. I
suppose you would have bitten your hand off for Kevin Doyle at that stage, who was recently just departed the scene when you arrived.
Yeah, well, yeah, but what you were looking for is you're looking for a natural goal scorer like Robbie Keane. If Robbie Keane had been, let's say, 6 or 7 years younger, it would have been terrific. But I didn't have that luxury, and so you have to make do. So, but people are not. Eventually, again, getting back to the point, you know, I wanted to try and qualify for the Euros for a start. I really. You know, next contract with the Republic probably dependent on that. Well, certainly did do if that was the case. And as a consequence, then you're having to chop and change. You're having to you know, have players. You have motivate players that might not be playing at the highest level into thinking that they can beat the best opposition going, like beating Germany and teams like this. But overall, that was really an enjoyable part of the job. I loved that, and the players responded. They responded magnificently. And not only that, you know, we finally lose to France. France had a week to prepare for the game, and we had 2 days, and they beat us in the last 16 of the competition. Then we go on to the World Cup, and we're 4 seeds in our group, but we managed to get to the playoffs. And it's because we got well and truly hammered by Denmark in a game that opened up in the second half because we needed to get goals in the game. And I put McGeady on and Wes Hoolahan. I knew that would weaken us physically, but we needed something maybe to try and conjure a goal or two. Had we stayed in front in the first half, you wouldn't have had to make the changes maybe until later on. But Eriksson scores the 3 goals, and we're well beaten. So it was I felt it was like a major stick to beat me with. But that's the nature of the game. So that's it. But if you're asking me, did I enjoy the Euros? It's up there with anything. It was fantastic. And as I said to you, to find out that, and the Republic of Ireland fans have gone for a while. Those days under Jack Charlton were just unbelievably splendid, really, really fantastic. And I speak to some people now who were young at the time, who were traveling to Stuttgart, who were traveling to these games and saying this was fantastic. And so to try and attempt to recreate that in parts in France was something magical for us, you know. And the players responded. Whatever you say about them, they responded. They threw, if they were short of some abilities and things like this here, they tried to hide it the best they could. They put heart and soul into it. And in all honesty, you know, the makings of the likes of Jeff Hendrick and Robbie Brady, they did wonderfully well in the tournament. And, you know, and as I said to you, that result against Ditley was just phenomenal, really.
Yeah. And Martin, last one or two questions for you. I know we're sort of pushing on time in terms of keeping you overboard. Martin, lastly, you mentioned there in the autobiography that you had a chance to manage a Premier League team while you were managing Ireland, but you sort of turned it down. Can you expand on that, or do you want to keep that secret?
I would think I'll just hold on to that one. All right.
Perfect. No problem, Martin. And Martin, and finally, I suppose, Martin, in terms of why now? Obviously, the autobiography, you probably mentioned it because you probably have more chapters yet to be told in terms of club management sort of stuff. Why did you feel now was the right time to?
You know what? Yeah, it's a good point, Jim. I think that just sitting down, I suppose maybe if I thought about it earlier, if I'd realized that COVID was going to last the length of time, maybe I would have started it earlier. It just had an idea or two in my head. I felt that there was certain days that I remember distinctly. And the book started from then, like first day ever as a professional player in England, and then Brian Clough coming a couple of years later. Those days are as clear to me as yesterday, like yesterday to me. So I started off like that. But I think it's really because of the length of time that I straddle. You know, I straddled this 50 years, as I think I said to you, the changes that have taken place. And I thought, well, okay, listen, let us see if I can marry the whole thing together. And just tell it in my own particular words, and that's really what I did. So I don't know. I probably don't have an answer for you to say why now, as to maybe another time. But perhaps just maybe that 50-year period, 50 years. God Almighty, you know, you're a young man, so you know you would have certainly missed a lot of these days that I'm talking about. So from that viewpoint. Maybe it was time, and maybe I got a bit of enjoyment of doing it.
Yeah, and Martin, lastly, a big game on this weekend on Sunday, Messi versus Mbappe. How are your feelings towards it, and who you're sort of leaning towards?
I would genuinely want Messi to win. I'd want him to win. I know that there's been battles raging in Argentina for years and years regarding Messi and Maradona, and Maradona holding it over him because he's won the World Cup. Messi is a phenomenal player, honestly, absolutely phenomenal. Which you know, I don't have to tell you that. And my heart would want him to win. Who wins? I haven't got a clue. But I would love him to win. You know, and I might not be the only one that would think that.
And obviously, your punditry worked out in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Did you enjoy it? Did yours work up? Do you think?
I really did. I grew into it. I must admit, it took me a little bit of time. It was a bit of a slow burner for me, perhaps because it was the time of year. But I did grow into the competition, and I have to say, I am looking forward to Sunday's game.
Yeah, Martin O'Neill, Autobiography on days like this, available in all bookstores throughout Ireland. Thanks for sharing some great memories of your childhood growing up in terms of your playing career, your managerial career. Thanks for answering some real tough, hard questions there as well tonight. Martin O'Neill, an absolute pleasure talking to you, sir, and many more chapters left to be told. We're looking forward to Autobiography 2.0, which is around the corner, I'm fairly sure.
I much appreciate it, Jim. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Take care.